Hello, everybody. This is Justin Petrosino, agronomist with Stewart Seeds. I cover our northern geography in Ohio and Indiana. And the big disease everyone's talking about is tar spot. So this is a quick update, hopefully about 15 minutes of your time, to go over what we know about the disease, what we know about management. We will know a lot more this winter. So we will try to spread that info out through our winter meetings and a couple of other venues. So tune back in for that, but we will cover what we know so far. We know this year has been a bad year for tar spot. The question everyone is asking is why. When we look at the spread of the disease, it first showed up in 2015. We know that it has spread from there, and 2015 is when it was first discovered. Obviously, the chances of someone walking into a cornfield and finding the first lesion ever that came here from Mexico somehow is very small. So it has to spread to a certain level before we can detect it. So it's likely been here a lot longer than 2015, and we've seen since then a pretty widespread. This is the current map, but this is obviously not everywhere that the disease is present. It seems to be a lot more widespread than this. I've seen it further south in Ohio, further east in Ohio. Indiana is pretty well painted with this disease. So what is causing tar spot to be so bad this year? When we look at the ideal conditions for tar spot, something from Mexico, we'd expect to have a higher temperature range. But what it looks like is the ideal conditions are 60 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Obviously, the disease can grow and reproduce outside of this range, but this is the ideal range for it. It likes high relative humidity, so 85%. So it does take some rainfall in order for it to have that relative humidity, but we can build that up in a cornfield pretty easily with just a little bit of rainfall. Leaf wetness, it takes about 6 to 8 hours of leaf wetness to infect the plant. That's similar to what we see with something like northern corn leaf blight, but it's significantly shorter of a time frame than gray leaf spot. And then it's a 2-week latent period. That's the period it takes from that spore to land on the plant, to infect the plant, to produce a lesion that's going to reproduce. So a rather long latent period for this disease, but still we see exponential growth. So when that first lesion lands and reproduces, it produces 100, and then those 100 produce 100, then those 100 produce 100. So it can come up in the canopy very fast. So what we saw with it this year is it tends to show up in early July, and that's when we first start to see those couple of lesions throughout the canopy, but it doesn't look bad. And once we get through July into August, if we've got that continued rainfall, those 100 produce 100, those 100 produce 100, and by the time we get into late August, we see pretty heavy proliferation of the disease throughout the field. So it's something that we know we need to scout for starting in July. And with the conditions we had this year, with some more rainfall in July and August than we're used to in a lot of areas, that's what really drove the disease. So is it going to be a problem in 2022? That's a very good question. It's going to depend on that weather. So if we see more rainfall than we're normally used to, if we see some cooler conditions, yes, tar spot could be an issue. We know that the disease overwinters in a field. It can blow in from relatively far away. So it's a disease that we're going to have to figure out and get used to managing. But we will continue to learn about it. And like I said, our winter meetings will have a lot more info for you. So what is Stewart doing specifically? I'm out screening our current germplasm, trying to rate which products are best across the board. If products seem to go up and down on ratings, what products those are. Our breeding and product management are looking at what we're going to be launching in 2023, 2024, 2025, 26, and so on, to see how those products rank for tar spot. Breeding's identified parent lines that are better than others for tar spot, so we're focusing in on those to help make some more crosses to increase our tolerance to tar spot where we can. But we don't want to jump on germplasm with issues in our geography. So Stewart has been successful because we're picking those products that work in Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky. We don't want to give up on something really important in order to get tar spot tolerance. So we don't want to jump into something that's really bad in the diplodia or has really bad roots or bad emergence or the yield is off where tar spot isn't an issue just to bring that tolerance in. So we're going to do our typical screening to make sure these products are what they need to be in order to make sure that they're going to fit in that Stewart footprint. So what we've learned, we'll talk a little bit about hybrid tolerance, fungicide efficacy, fungicide timing, to help with managing for 2022. Maybe put some of your minds at ease that yes, we can control this thing. We just need to be a little more diligent. So from the hybrid tolerance standpoint, like I said, we're not going to get into individual hybrids today. I've got a few more plots I want to rate in order to make sure that this is going to be a good data set. We see a range just like everybody else in the marketplace. 623 looks to be very tolerant, which that product keeps surprising us with what it can do from a yield standpoint. And now with tar spot, the new 13SS312 seems to be that intermediate. So it's average to above average depending on the plot I'm rating it in. 13DT962, another new product, seems to be poor for tar spot. So we've got a range. The key thing I will say is tolerance, it ranges from product to product. It also ranges within that product. So if we put 623 under some less than ideal conditions for that hybrid, we put it in the wrong field, it gets wet feet early and really struggles. If we start to throw multiple diseases onto it, so we put on northern corn leaf blight, a little diplodia stalk rot, some tar spot, and then we sprinkle in a little bit of southern rust, we can see that tolerance break down because the plant is under stress. So a key management piece that we don't talk about enough is making sure we put the hybrid in the right place, and we make sure we're taking care of all those things in the background, like fertility, that are going to allow those products to express that natural tolerance. So there's a lot of folks talking about, okay, I'm going to cut back on my fertility for next year. What can I cut out of my program? We want to make sure that we're not taking too much out and making these products potentially more susceptible to disease. Another issue that's cropped up is stalk integrity. This is a disease that basically shuts down the leaves of the plant, and you will see brown leaves on green stalks with green ear husks. That plant is still trying to fill that ear, and the way it's going to do that is from the stalk. So under severe pressure, we do see stalk integrity is a major problem. This was a photo I took in a plot this week where you can see we had 100% of the products failed the push test. So the push test is where you push on the stalk right about where the ear's at and touch the top of that plant to the row next to it. If it bounces back, you're fine. If you hear a pop and it slowly stands up, you've likely broken the rind, but we still got a strong stalk there. And then if you push it and it falls over, obviously it's a problem. So what I did is I pulled all the leaves off of these plants to show that there's still some yield potential there. We're still potentially looking at 200 some bushel per acre corn, but we have a very weak stalk. And if those stalks break, that corn goes down. We've got potential other issues with exacerbating ear molds, other problems, especially when it comes to harvest and the amount of time you're going to spend in the combine. That goes up significantly. And so when we do have tar spot come in, it's not a disease where we want to sit around and let the corn dry in the field. It's much better to go through and harvest it while it's standing. And a lot of times you're going to see this corn is a lot drier than you think it would be. Just looking at an overall screenshot of harvest scores from this plot, you can see the later we go in maturity, the better the stalks are. And that's not necessarily saying that later products are better for stalk integrity. It's just that these earlier products are a couple weeks ahead of the later stuff. So what we'll likely see is right now the 105-day products are struggling with stalk integrity. If you go out in 3 weeks, you're going to see continued deterioration of those 109, 111-day products, and those will be struggling with stalk integrity. We already see a couple of products showing up with weak stalks. And then eventually we'll get to a point where that later season stuff from 113 to 115 day is also suffering. So that really tells us we need to keep scouting these fields. We can't just go out and do one push test and say that field's fine and just forget about it until we get there with a combine. We need to be diligent in scouting. Looking at how much leaf area is lost with tar spot to cause an issue, it's not very much. You can see the ear leaf on top, and then as we go down, we actually go up in the canopy for those leaves that I stripped off the plant. But you can see we're at 5, maybe 10% leaf area loss, depending on where you're looking at. And we're seeing yield loss and stalk integrity issues. So we don't need a lot of disease to cause problems. One tool we have that works very well, we're seeing from multiple tests, is fungicide. Not all of them are unique, or not all fungicides are equal. When we look at something like Delaro, we have very good control. You can see here in a sprayed versus unsprayed demo, this was a field where they left a check strip with 09 DP850, which is a little more susceptible than some other hybrids, but we do see good control. We also see that ear, along with the plant, is staying alive longer. We're getting more kernel depth and more kernel fill, which equates to more yield. So the yield loss is really, tar spot is shutting this plant down early. It can't produce the carbohydrates it needs to fill the ear. So when you look at the plant health map on the right from climate, we can see that we definitely have on the right of that map a lot more plant health than we do in the unsprayed portion to the left. When we look at what fungicides are effective, there are some on the market. This was a research trial from 2020 with the Crop Protection Network, which is a group of universities that publish information over a wide geography. So this is Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois, Indiana in 2020. Like I said, this is a moderate to low pressure environment. But we did still see some yield loss from tar spot compared to the control with the fungicides. And they sprayed at typical timing. So VT to R1, they came back at R4, R5, and then took a final rating and then took it to yield. So just so you've got an idea of timing, the R4 is about 21 days after the application. R5 is about 30 days after the application. What we see is up to R4, fungicides work. And most fungicides on the market will be labeled for about 14 to 21 days of residual control. But what we see after that point, there are a couple standouts. Delaro is definitely one of them. This was at the 8-ounce rate, so we could even go to a higher rate to make up for higher disease pressure, for poor application. If we've just got an airplane that's not going to get the coverage we want, we can make up for that with a higher rate. Or if you're doing a ground rig or irrigation and you've got excellent coverage, that higher rate's going to give us more residual control. So what we see is Delaro ranked among the top for 21 days after, 30 days after that final rating, and then taking it to yield. So a stellar product there that we can utilize. When we look at timing, this was a recent study from Michigan. There's a lot more research being done around this. But what we see is we have our treatment timing, our moisture, our yield level, good pith, so how healthy that stalk is, tar spot leaf rating, push test rating, intactness, and then lodging score. And they have susceptible and tolerant, more likely to be called the less susceptible. There's no true tolerance that we can see, but we have one that's better for tar spot, one that's worse. And we see a pretty big yield hit from the susceptible line. We see worse stalk health. We see worse reaction to the push test, a higher lodging score, which is bad. And I'll just jump down to the R1 timing. So this is our typical fungicide timing. We see that we maximized yield. We increased our good pith percent. We reduced our tar spot leaf rating score. We had better intactness. We had better lodging score. So a single application of Delaro Complete at the R1 timing, again, it's a very effective product for tar spot. it worked out. We see other things like a V7 did gain us a little bit, but did not maximize things. Our V7 plus R1 application, so two applications, didn't really gain us much over the R1. The R1 plus R3 didn't gain us much over the R1. But again, this is one location, 1 year, so we'll have a lot more information coming out. But it does look like if we're using an effective product like Delaro or Delaro Complete at that R1 timing we're used to, we can have good control. Now, that key piece is also we need to make that application in a timely manner. So if we're not getting out to scout until after R1 and we're calling it an airplane and they're 2 weeks delayed, we could really lose a lot of yield and a lot of stalk integrity just by delaying that fungicide application. So we definitely want to be at that R1 timing. So to do, go out, scout your fields, look for the disease, check that standability, and don't do it once. Go out every couple of weeks. If we get a rainy day during harvest, make sure you're continually checking that standability piece. If a field fails that push test on the first try, mark that for early harvest. We don't want to leave that field out. It's likely drier than you think it is, and it's time to get that corn off. Don't go harvest beans and think it's going to air dry some more. You'll come back, it'll be on the ground. Go back in 2 weeks, like I said, scout again. Stalks are going to break down quickly. If you have any other questions, feel free to give me a call. We will be putting out more information on this as we get it. So have a good and safe harvest, and we'll talk to you soon.